The final horizon is finally here, the true ending to Sonic Frontiers, the update everyone has been looking forward to. I must say, it's been quite a journey getting to this point, a pretty awesome one, at least for me. And the final horizon is honestly an amazing conclusion to Sonic Frontiers. Now, while this update may not be 100% perfect, I had a pretty great time playing it, and in my opinion, I thought the final horizon was incredible. First up, I'm going to give a quick, non-spoiler review of what I thought of the update, because I will be going over spoilers for the entire final horizon, and of course, the base game of Sonic Frontiers. So, no spoilers first. I think this update provides exactly what it set out to do, which is remaking the entire ending of the game and making the story and finale more impactful. The story this time is a pretty big improvement, delivering on some really big aspects that everyone was hoping for the first time around. And the conclusion to it all culminates in one of the best Sonic experiences I think I've ever had. Aside from the story though, the gameplay of Oranos Island was completely redone, although you can still play through the old story as well. Now on Oranos, you can play as Sonic, Amy, Knuckles, and Tails, and all the platforming challenges of the original Oranos were changed up to fit the new characters. These new characters really didn't hold my attention too much, and I'll get into why that feels later on, but I think that was my really only complaint with this update. It's not even that playing as these characters isn't fun either, but I usually just stuck with Sonic unless I was required to play as a different character. The one major complaint that I've seen a lot of people talking about, and I definitely felt myself too, was the major difficulty spike that this update comes with. Now I know I'm in the minority here in saying this, but I honestly really enjoyed the extra hard challenge that was in parts of this update. Again, spoilers for later, but if you thought base Frontiers being too easy was a problem, well, Kishimoto has an answer for you, and it's the final horizon. Aside from difficulty, there were new cyberspace levels, but I can't really say too much without spoilers, other than that they're actually really good. So go play those if you haven't already, and in fact, go play this entire update if you haven't already, and come back to this video when you're done. It may not be everyone's ideal update, but I sure enjoyed it, and now I think it's time I dive a bit deeper into why I think that is. Alright, so to begin with, I have to cover the biggest parts of this update first, the new characters and new story. The biggest draw of this update for a lot of people, including myself, was the playable Amy, Knuckles, and Tails, because it's been such a long time since they were all playable in a 3D Sonic game. And how was their implementation into the final horizon? Well, it's complicated. I think there were a lot of different compounding issues that all amounted into these characters not feeling the best they could have been. The first issue you encounter right away is that the player controller in Frontiers is just not really built for extremely precise platforming, which there is a lot of in this update. A lot of the time, I felt myself sliding off platforms or missing jumps because the level design in the final horizon is pretty challenging. I did eventually get used to it, but that wasn't the only issue I had with these new characters. A lot of abilities in their moveset just felt clunky or poorly designed. A good example of this is when you want to fly with Tails or glide with Knuckles, and instead of just holding the jump button and flying or gliding right away, there's this weird wind-up animation that starts first and completely threw me off a few times. Knuckles and Tails' stop moves also have this same issue where you don't immediately start going down when you press the button, and instead float in the air for a second, which just felt unresponsive. And I think my third biggest issue is that you have to level up each individual character and unlock all of their skills, which admittedly doesn't take a whole lot of time, but there were instances where in order to progress, I needed a specific ability that I didn't unlock yet, so I had to backtrack and try and find the skill point Cocos to get enough points and unlock the skill. The other drawback of this is that each character's stats are also at level 1, and the enemies on this new Oranos Island will absolutely destroy you if you even get close to them, so I didn't even bother fighting any while I was anyone but Sonic. I still had a lot of fun with each one though. Abusing their movesets in dumb ways is always fun to mess around with, and once I did unlock the moves I wanted, I had a pretty good time playing with them while I had to. And the reason I had to play as these characters was to progress the story, which is the other big draw of this update, and I'll talk about it now. The Final Horizon delivers one of the best Sonic ending stories in a very long time. It feels like the first game to truly tap back into the magic of games like Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Unleashed with their stories. And it was an absolute blast to finally see Sonic Frontiers fully redeem itself with this new final story. Right away, my theory about when or how the story would take place was wrong, but not completely wrong. I did say that I didn't think Sonic Team would be willing to remove the old Oranos Island, and I was right about that, but what I didn't see coming was that this ending is a completely optional path you can choose once you get to Oranos Island, although it is recommended to at least beat the game the original way first. The story is pretty straightforward for the most part, at least if you've seen any of the trailers for the Final Horizon. Sonic and Sage decide to turn the cyber corruption into a new power source, so Amy, Tails, and Knuckles have to get the Chaos Emeralds in his place. All of that goes along pretty smoothly, but what I wasn't expecting was new lore and backstory for the pilots of the Titans, which you learn about by doing the trial towers as Sonic. Specifically, the biggest new thing here was the addition of the Master King Coco, who was the leader of the Ancients. Once Sonic does finish all the trials though, and everyone else has collected all the emeralds, we move on to the true ending of Sonic Frontiers. Sonic finally faces off against the End, who is now possessing the body of the Supreme Titan, and he awakens his cyber super form, which is what gives him the blue eyes. Now before I say anything else, wow! This is easily the coolest Super Sonic has ever been, and it isn't even close. I'll talk about it more when I get into the final boss gameplay section, but this seriously was one of the rawest things the Sonic series has ever done. Moving on from Cyber Super Sonic though, or Super Sonic 2 if you prefer, once Sonic does finally take down the End Titan, he fully unleashes the cyber corruption and goes into a frenzied cyber mode, which looks awesome, and takes out the End all on his own this time. The ending from here on plays out pretty much the same, except that Sage is still alive this time. Her return was teased at the end of Frontier's original ending anyways, so I think just keeping her alive here was the best move Sonic Team could have done. Plus it allows for Dr. Eggman to have a better ending now too. All in all, the story for the Final Horizon was one of the best of any Sonic game, and I'm so glad this update was able to deliver an extremely satisfying conclusion compared to the somewhat rushed feeling story of the original game. Now that I've gotten the biggest draws of this update out of the way, I think it's time I talk about the smaller parts of this update. Or, well, I guess the taller parts of this update. Yeah, the level design in the Final Horizon is definitely strange to say the least. I think what happened here is that Sonic Team just didn't have enough time to remake all of Oranos to fit each character's playstyle, so their solution was to just grab a bunch of Roblox obbies and throw them into the sky. And most of these really aren't too bad. They just look really out of place, and I think the biggest reason these don't really work for a lot of people is because of the game's horrendous pop-in that is still present. The pop-in was definitely noticeable before on some islands, but for the most part, you could get used to it. But here there are things constantly popping in and out of view, no matter where you go or where you look. I think the biggest missed opportunity this update had was not fixing the pop-in, and that is a genuine point of criticism that doesn't have any upsides or positive spins to it. Like I said though, the level design isn't too bad here. The hardest parts of these platforming challenges mostly come down to the player controller not being the best it could be for precise platforming, but I actually really enjoyed the harder difficulty this time around. And once I turned the deceleration rate to 100 in my options menu, I felt like I had a lot more control over each character. There also aren't any 2D sections at all, which is a huge plus for the level design in this update. Falling right alongside the level design here are some brand new cyberspace levels. Don't worry, I didn't forget about the trial towers, I just wanted to go over cyberspace first. I haven't mastered every new level that they added in this update, but I at least tried each one out, and these are easily my favorite cyberspace levels in the entire game. These levels feel like a fully fleshed out version of the Coco challenges from Update 2, and this time around, they're turned into actual levels. Almost every single one has some sort of focus on momentum, or at least play into the strengths of cyberspace, rather than just reusing old levels and making them feel worse than their original counterparts. These levels are what cyberspace should have been from the start. They truly feel like special stages now, and all have a unique challenge aspect to them, which was missing from a lot of the original cyberspace levels. There's also a bunch of new challenges to do in these, instead of the usual get S rank and red rings, so these levels can also play completely different compared to the originals. The difficulty here is of course also keeping in line with the rest of the Final Horizon, which means that these levels aren't just pushovers that you can S rank and complete every challenge on your first try. But cyberspace isn't the biggest point of difficulty here in this update. That honor undoubtedly goes to the trial towers. These things are an absolute time waster if you fall from high up, and unlike the towers on Rhea Island, there are no checkpoints to get back up to these if you fall off midway through. Again though, I've said it many times already, but I'm a sucker for hard platforming challenges. I've played my fair share of platformers, so I felt right at home on these towers. But I can absolutely see why some people aren't a huge fan of these things, since like I said, they are a huge time waster if you mess up at all. Getting to the top of these towers is another story in terms of difficulty entirely though. Each tower has you complete a trial, which ranges from defeating a few enemies, to beating every titan in a row with only 400 rings, and only being able to use the perfect parry. This was the biggest difficulty spike in the update for me, and I legitimately want to know if some of these trials were even playtested on hard or extreme mode. The second trial gives people a lot of trouble for a bit, but it's really not that hard. All you need to do is parry the enemy's attacks, which is actually what every single trial is preparing you for, the perfect parry. The first trial doesn't really have much to do with parrying, but the second trial wants you to parry the enemy's spinning blades back and forth while you deal damage so you can defeat them all fast enough. The third trial requires you to parry in order to destroy the dog robot things, and the fourth trial is a fight against the Master Ninja, which has a lot of parryable attacks. and the final trial is all about utilizing the perfect parry during the boss fights. I wasn't really sure why all of this was, until I got to the final boss and unlocked Supersonic's new power, which requires a perfect parry. Each trial was training not only Sonic, but also you the player to get used to the perfect parry. Other than that, the last trial is near impossible on anything but easy, and even then it's still extremely difficult, but I have seen people manage to beat it on hard mode. So all that being said, completing one of the hardest things I've ever done in a Sonic game, and maybe even gaming in general, I think these towers and trials are a blast. I was motivated to see it through to the end, literally, and that is exactly what I got once I finally finished each trial tower. This final boss was by far my favorite Sonic final boss of all time, at least simply from a gameplay perspective. This easily beats any other Supersonic fight simply because it feels like an actual fight, not just a Supersonic cutscene that you get to play. And it is so good! I was lucky enough to be able to do every single special attack on my first blind playthrough, so I was able to see these extremely raw moves that Supersonic pulls off. Seriously, Sonic just becomes an anime character here in some of these attacks, and they're absolutely awesome. Watching Eggman grab Supreme's gun was awesome too, and the payoff was incredible. Watching the end finally go down while Sonic transforms into a fully corrupted Super Cyber form was something I will never forget. And I mean, come on, this rendition of I'm Here by Kellen Quinn is the perfect track for the final fight. This boss replaces the old end fight, which was just a reskinned hacking minigame that you do a couple of times throughout the game, so finally seeing the end truly realized as a formidable foe that you can fight as Supersonic was so worth it, and this boss is amazing because of it. I'm starting to run out of words to describe how much I loved this boss fight. This fight and ending single-handedly made the update incredible for me, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. And that's really all I want to talk about with the Final Horizon. There's a bunch of other little small things, but I wanted to keep this review mostly big picture stuff and cover as much as I could without making this an extremely long video. This update may not be for everyone, and I think I'm probably in the minority in terms of enjoying the difficulty and other things, but I am so happy with how this update turned out, and it has cemented for me that Sonic Frontiers is one of my favorite Sonic games of all time. In fact, I'm now going to say that Sonic Frontiers has made its way into my top 5 favorite Sonic games. The final boss, the story, the challenge, I loved all of it. And while it may not have been perfect, it's really hard to envision this update any other way than what we got. And so that's it. Sonic Frontiers has officially concluded its updates, and we now get to move on to the future of Sonic. But I'd be lying if I said it also wasn't bittersweet. I haven't been making videos for too long now, but Frontiers has already played a huge part in my channel's growth, and it was definitely a big factor for me even starting this channel to begin with. I've been following this game ever since it was announced. You can watch my How Sonic Frontiers Redeemed Itself video to see that proof, but it's definitely sad to finally see this chapter close. This however means we now get to look forward to bigger and bolder things in the future, so hit the subscribe button if you're interested in keeping up with it all, because I've never been more invested in Sonic than I am right now. I'm super excited and extremely hopeful for the future of Sonic, and with how Sonic Frontiers' final update turned out for the game, I can say this with absolute confidence: Sonic the Hedgehog is back.